When my stepfather called that afternoon, his voice was trembling, but not with guilt. It was the kind of shaky laughter people make when they've done something unforgivable and are trying to pretend it's no big deal. "Hey kiddo," he said in that falsely cheerful tone I'd grown to hate. "You remember that old mountain cabin of yours? Well, I sold it." For a few seconds, my brain refused to process the words. I just stood there, phone pressed against my ear, frozen between disbelief and fury. "What did you say?" He chuckled like it was a joke. "Relax, okay? It's not a big deal. I just had to settle a few gambling debts. Keep the wolves off my back. I'll make it right eventually." There was a pause. I could hear the faint clicking of poker chips through the receiver, the muffled sound of men talking in the background, laughter smoke, that disgusting haze of his world that I'd spent half my life trying to escape. "You sold my cabin," I said again, this time with the quiet, sharp edge that always scared him more than yelling. "Technically," he said, dragging the word out like he was explaining taxes to a child, "it was under my name. So, legally." "Stop," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "You mean the cabin my mom left to me in her will? The one she built with her own hands before she met you, that cabin?" He sighed. Yeah, that one. But come on, it's not like you ever go there anymore. It was just sitting there, collecting dust." That's when something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a slow, painful silence. That cabin wasn't just sitting there. It was the only piece of my mother I had left. I could still see her standing on that porch the day we painted the shutters together. Me, a teenage girl with paint-smeared jeans, and her laughing with her hair tied up in a messy bun. She'd said, "One day when I'm gone, this will be your safe place." And she meant it, because she knew I'd need one. Why, I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "Why would you do that?" He hesitated for half a second before answering, his voice turning colder. "Because I had to, and because you'll be fine, you always are. Don't act like this is the end of the world." Then he laughed again, a sound that made my stomach turn, and said, "You'll get over it." That was the moment I decided I wouldn't. I was 34 years old, living alone in a small apartment in Denver, working as a freelance graphic designer. I'd built my life from the ground up after years of picking up the emotional rubble my stepfather left behind when my mom died. She passed away when I was 23, breast cancer. I'd just started college, and he'd spent the last of her insurance money on poker tables and whiskey. By the time I found out, it was too late to save anything. Not the house, not the car, not the marriage she'd died believing was real. The cabin was all that remained. I had spent every summer there as a child. It was tucked deep in the mountains of Estes Park, surrounded by pine trees that whispered when the wind passed through them. The air always smelled like sap and rain, and at night you could see every star like it had been hung there just for you. That cabin had seen my laughter, my grief, my mother's illness, her final goodbyes. And now it was gone, traded for the kind of cheap thrill that only lasts until the next bet is lost. I spent that night pacing my apartment, my hands trembling, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my stepfather's grin, that smug, careless expression that said he still thought he owned me. But he didn't, not anymore. By dawn, I had made a decision. I was going to get it back. The next morning, I called the county clerk's office and requested the sale record. The woman on the other end sounded apologetic but firm. "The property was transferred last month," she said. "New owner's name is Robert Hale." "Do you know the sale amount?" I asked. $85,000. 85,000. My mother's life's work, the walls she built, the fireplace she designed stone by stone, all reduced to less than the cost of a new car. "Do you know where I can find this Robert Hale?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't give out personal addresses, but I can tell you he owns a construction company out near Boulder." "Thank you," I said quietly, already writing the name down. When I hung up, I sat there staring at the paper for a long time. My hand was shaking. Not from fear this time, from rage. For years, I'd tried to live a peaceful life. I avoided confrontation. I kept my distance from the chaos of my stepfather's world, but this was different. This was my mother's legacy. And I was done being the quiet, forgiving daughter. I found Robert Hale's office 2 days later, a modest building off a quiet road, with a sign that read, "Hale Construction and Restoration." The irony wasn't lost on me. The receptionist looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. I need to speak to Mr. Hale. It's about the mountain cabin he recently purchased from Alan Brooks. The receptionist frowned. One moment. She disappeared down the hall, then returned a few minutes later. Mr. Hale can see you now. When I stepped into his office, I wasn't sure what to expect, maybe a greedy investor or some smug flipper looking to turn a profit. But instead, I found a man in his 40s with tired eyes and a steady posture like someone who'd seen more than his share of hard days. He gestured to a chair. You're Alan's stepdaughter, right? I nodded cautiously. Yes. And I need to know why you bought my cabin. He sighed, leaning back. Look, I didn't know it was yours. Alan told me he was selling off an old property he didn't use anymore, said it had been in his family but nobody cared about it. I clenched my fists under the table. He lied. Yeah, Hale said quietly. I figured that out after the papers went through. A friend up in Estes told me the place used to belong to your mother. He said she passed away years ago. I didn't feel right about it. Something about his tone caught me off guard. It wasn't defensive, it was regretful. Then why didn't you back out? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. Because by the time I realized what I'd stepped into, the deal was done. And I needed the land. My business was going under, I couldn't afford to undo it. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to throw every ounce of anger I had at him. But the truth was, he wasn't the one who stole it from me. Alan was. Still, I couldn't walk away. Is there any way, I said carefully, that I can buy it back? Hale hesitated. It's not that simple. The cabin's already being renovated. My crew started last week. We've put in close to 20 grand in materials already. My stomach dropped. You're rebuilding it. Restoring it, he corrected gently. It's a beautiful place. You should see the view from the deck. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. I know. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. I'll tell you what. Come up to the site tomorrow. See what we've done. Maybe we can work something out. I nodded slowly, though my mind was already spinning with memories, the smell of pine. My mother's laughter echoing through the halls, the way she'd sit on the steps at sunset, humming under her breath. That cabin wasn't just wood and stone, it was her soul. And if my stepfather thought he could erase us, he was about to find out how wrong he was. The next morning I woke before dawn. The air in Denver was still and gray, and the silence of my apartment felt heavy, too clean, too quiet, like a life that didn't quite fit anymore. I packed a small duffel bag with essentials, grabbed a thermos of coffee, and started the 2-hour drive toward the mountains. The road to Estes Park was one I knew by heart. Every curve, every mile marker felt like a ghost, whispering pieces of the past. I used to sit in the passenger seat of my mother's old Jeep, our hands sticky from gas station candy, the smell of pine and gasoline mixing in the summer air. Back then, the world was still warm, still kind. Now all that warmth had been traded away for a gambling debt. The closer I got to the mountains, the tighter my chest became. It wasn't just anger, it was grief layered and old resurfacing like something half buried in snow. The trees thickened along the road, their branches forming a tunnel that swallowed the light. And then suddenly there it was, the cabin, or rather what was left of it. The front porch was covered in construction materials, planks, sawdust, stacks of stone. A truck with Hale Construction printed on the side was parked nearby, and standing in front of the door, clipboard in hand, was Robert Hale. He turned as I pulled up, lifting a hand in greeting. Morning, he said, voice steady but cautious, as though he wasn't sure if I'd come to talk or to burn the place down. Morning, I replied, stepping out of the car. Up close, the cabin looked both familiar and foreign. The bones of it were the same, the sloping roof, the brick chimney, the old pine tree that bent over the porch like a guardian. But the rest, it looked like someone had tried to polish a memory. New paint, new trim, even the shutters had been replaced. I walked up to the porch, slowly running my fingers along the railing. The wood was smooth, freshly sanded, but it felt wrong, too clean, too deliberate. It's different, I said quietly. Hale nodded. We had to replace most of the exterior, termite damage wrought, but we're keeping the original frame. I didn't answer. My throat was tight. I stared at the door, the same one my mother and I had painted together when I was 16. Back then it was a deep forest green. Now it was a polished walnut, expensive but soulless. Do you want to come inside? Hale asked gently. I hesitated, then nodded. The moment I stepped over the threshold, I felt something inside me twist. The air smelled of sawdust and varnish, not the familiar scent of cedar and candle wax. The fireplace was gone, ripped out, replaced by a sleek electric insert. The kitchen had been gutted, modernized with stainless steel appliances. Everything was perfect, and I hated it. "This isn't her cabin," I said finally. Hale looked down, silent for a moment. "I know." I turned to face him, the words sharp in my mouth. "Then why did you touch it? Why didn't you just leave it as it was?" He met my eyes, unflinching. "Because it was falling apart. I thought, maybe if I restored it, I could give it new life. I didn't realize what I was erasing." For a moment we stood there in heavy silence. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, an old tarnished brass key. "I found this under one of the floorboards," he said quietly. "Didn't know what it opened, but I thought you might." My breath caught. I recognized it immediately. It was the key to the old wooden chest my mother kept in her bedroom closet, the one she told me to open when the time was right. I had searched for it after she died, but it was gone. I took the key in trembling hands. "Thank you," I whispered. Hale nodded. "There's a bedroom at the back. The chest might still be there." I didn't wait. I walked down the narrow hallway, the sound of my footsteps echoing softly. The bedroom door was half open, and when I pushed it wider, I froze. The old wooden chest was there, dusted off, but still the same dark oak brass hinges, initials carved faintly on the top, MC. "Mom." I knelt beside it, my heart pounding, and slid the key into the lock. It turned easily, as if it had been waiting all this time. Inside were a few folded letters, a small jewelry box, and an envelope with my name written in her handwriting. My vision blurred. I hadn't seen her handwriting in over a decade. The way the ink curled in the loops of my name, it hit me like a punch. I opened the letter carefully, the paper fragile beneath my fingers. "My darling Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and this cabin is now yours. You've always had a stronger heart than me. I built this place so you'd always have somewhere safe, somewhere that's yours alone. Don't ever let anyone take that away from you. Promise me that. Love always, Mom." I read it 3 times before the tears finally came. The kind that don't fall easily but shake your whole body when they do. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I broke my promise." Behind me, I heard Hale's quiet footsteps in the hall, but he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The only sound was the wind outside rattling the new window panes and the slow creak of the old floor beneath my knees. When I finally stood, I turned to him. "How much do you want for it?" He hesitated. "I told you it's not just about money. I've already put in a lot." "I'll pay double," I said, "whatever it takes." He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "You really love this place." "It's all I have left of her." He nodded slowly. "Let me think about it." I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wasn't a bad man, just a man who'd made choices out of necessity, maybe even desperation. In that moment, I almost pitied him, but pity didn't matter, not now. When I walked out of the cabin, the wind had picked up. It carried the faint scent of pine and rain, familiar, haunting. I turned back one last time, staring at the cabin that wasn't quite mine anymore, but still somehow felt like it was. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. A message from Alan. "You found out, huh? Don't waste your money trying to get it back. The guy's not gonna sell." And then almost mockingly, "You never did know when to let things go, kiddo." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The anger that had been simmering all day boiled over. He wanted me to give up, to let it go, to move on while he kept laughing. But I wasn't that little girl he used to intimidate anymore. If he thought he could bury my mother's memory under his debts, he was about to learn what it meant to lose everything. Because this time I wasn't just going to take the cabin back. I was going to make him pay for every piece of my mother's life he'd destroyed. That night, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly through the narrow roads, winding around Estes Park, my headlights cutting through the fog, my mother's words echoing inside me like a heartbeat. "Don't ever let anyone take that away from you. Promise me that." I had broken that promise once. I wouldn't break it again. I pulled into a small motel just outside of town, the kind with flickering neon lights and peeling wallpaper, and checked in for the night. The room smelled faintly of old wood and cigarette smoke, but I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, Alan's text still glowing on the screen. He wanted me to give up. He wanted me small, powerless, the same way he made my mother feel before she died. I remembered their arguments, her quiet voice against his booming one, her soft apologies every time he yelled. And I remembered her hands, the way they'd tremble when she wrote in her journal, the way she'd smile through the pain and say, "He's just under pressure, Emma. He's not all bad." But he always was. I spent years believing forgiveness was strength. That's what my mother taught me. But maybe she was wrong, or maybe she forgave him because she couldn't fight him. But I could. I opened my laptop, logged into the county's online property database, and began researching. Hale's name appeared on multiple land purchases, mostly fixer-uppers around the mountains. He wasn't rich, but he was methodical, steady. Allen, on the other hand, had a record that spanned decades: unpaid taxes, eviction notices, even a DUI that disappeared mysteriously years ago. That was the difference between them. Hale built things, Allen destroyed them, and somewhere in that difference I would find my leverage. The next morning, I drove back to Denver and made my first call to my mother's old lawyer, a man named Richard Lawson. He'd been kind to me after the funeral, helping me sort through her estate. I hadn't spoken to him in years. "Emma," he said warmly when he picked up. "It's been a long time. How are you?" I took a deep breath. "I'm calling about the mountain cabin. It's gone." There was a pause. Gone. Allen sold it, without my permission. He said it was under his name. Richard's tone changed instantly from gentle to sharp. "That's impossible. Your mother's will was explicit. The cabin was left entirely to you. I filed the title transfer myself." "Then how did he do it?" "Let me look into it," he said. "I'll call you back in an hour." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. If Richard was right, if Allen had forged or manipulated documents, that wasn't just theft. It was fraud. An hour later, Richard called back, his voice clipped and furious. "Emma, you need to listen carefully. The title transfer was tampered with 6 months ago. Someone filed a fake quitclaim deed transferring the property from your name to his. It was notarized, but the signature isn't yours. I can prove that." For a moment I couldn't breathe, so he forged it. "Yes, and if we can prove intent, that's criminal. I'll start the paperwork for an injunction right away, but we'll need to move fast before the new owner makes more permanent changes." I exhaled shakily. "Thank you, Richard, really." When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the letter from my mother still tucked safely in my bag. It felt like she was there with me, her voice whispering between the words. "Fight for it, Emma. Don't let him win." Over the next week, I met with Richard twice, signed affidavits, and gathered everything: proof of my mother's will, my stepfather's history of financial manipulation, even old emails showing him begging me for money. The case was building. But something inside me wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted him to feel it, the loss, the helplessness, the shame. So I planned. It started with a phone call. I waited until Friday night. I knew where he'd be. There was a dive bar near his apartment, one he practically lived in. I called at 10:42 p.m. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick and irritated. "What do you want, Emma?" "Just to say thank you," I said calmly. He laughed. "For what?" "Finally teaching you not to be so attached to stupid things. For teaching me how to take something back." He snorted. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You'll see," I said softly and hung up. I imagined the confusion on his face, the way he'd scowl, trying to piece it together, a man who'd always believed he was smart or untouchable. But this time he wasn't. Because what he didn't know was that I'd found his pressure points: the unpaid taxes, the fraudulent deed, and the gambling debts he thought were buried. I'd already contacted his lender. I'd already spoken to the bank that held his accounts. And soon everything he'd ever used to control others would crumble. 3 weeks later, Richard called with an update. "We got it. The court issued a temporary freeze on the property. Hale can't sell, renovate, or transfer ownership until the case is settled." I smiled for the first time in days. "So that means—" "It means your stepfather is in serious legal trouble. Once we confirm the forgery, he'll be facing multiple charges." I thanked him and hung up, feeling the weight in my chest finally shift. That evening I drove back to the mountains. I needed to see the cabin again, not as a victim, but as someone who was finally reclaiming what was hers. The air was crisp, the smell of pine sharp and alive. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long golden streaks across the forest floor. As I stepped out of the car, I saw Hale standing by the porch, arms crossed, watching me approach. "I heard about the court order," he said simply. I nodded. "It's true. My stepfather forged everything." He sighed. "I figured. He called me last week trying to convince me to sell the place back to him before things got messy. Said it was all a misunderstanding. I felt a surge of disgust. That's exactly who he is. Haley studied me for a moment. You're not like him. No, I said softly. I'm like her. He smiled faintly. Your mom. I nodded. She built this place with her own hands. Every nail, every board. She made it something beautiful, and he tried to destroy that. Just like he destroyed her. For a moment, Hale looked down thoughtful. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Here he said, a copy of the sale contract. I'm terminating it. The cabin's yours again. I blinked. What, you don't have to. I do, he interrupted. You said it yourself. It's all you have left of her. I've got other projects. This one. It doesn't feel right unless it's in the right hands. I took the paper stunned. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, he said, smiling faintly. Just take care of it. Take care of her memory. The sun was setting behind him, the light catching in his hair, the air turning gold around us. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace. As he turned to leave, I looked up at the cabin. It was still scarred, half new, half old, but it was mine again. That night, I sat on the porch steps with a blanket around my shoulders and my mother's letter in my lap. The forest whispered softly, the wind carrying her voice between the trees. You were right, Mom, I murmured. You built this place to keep me safe. And you did. I closed my eyes, feeling the cool air against my skin. Somewhere deep down, I could almost hear her laughter again, faint but real. But I wasn't finished yet. Alan still needed to pay. And I already knew exactly how I'd make that happen. I waited 2 weeks before I made my next move. The legal case was already rolling. Alan's forged deed was under investigation. His accounts were frozen and the walls were closing in. But that wasn't enough. Because knowing him, he would find a way to twist it all, make himself the victim, spin some story about family misunderstandings or a daughter's overreaction. That's how he'd survived all his life, twisting truth into pity. But this time I wouldn't let him talk his way out. So I decided to make him face what he'd done in a way that no amount of manipulation could erase. It was a cold Sunday evening when I drove to his apartment. The building was a crumbling mess of faded paint and broken lights, a fitting reflection of the man who lived inside it. I parked on the street, sat for a few minutes, and let my heart calm itself before I went in. When I finally knocked, there was a long pause before I heard him shuffle toward the door. It opened halfway, revealing Alan, gray-haired, bloated from years of whiskey and regret, still trying to wear the arrogance of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone else. Emma, he said, smirking faintly. Didn't expect to see you here. You come to yell at me some more. I stared at him, calm. I came to tell you the truth. He chuckled, stepping aside. Well, come on in then, kiddo. Let's hear it. The apartment reeked of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Poker chips were scattered across the coffee table next to a half-empty bottle of bourbon. His TV blared a sports channel that he muted only after collapsing into his recliner. So he said, leaning back, You got your fancy lawyer involved, huh? Thought you'd make Daddy pay for your little cabin. It was my mother's cabin, I said quietly. He scoffed. Yeah. And now it's all yours again, I hear. Congrats. Guess you got what you wanted. You can stop pretending you're the victim now. I stood there for a long moment just watching him. The man who had destroyed everything beautiful in my mother's life. The man who took and never once looked back. You know what's funny? I said softly. You think you won. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? You think this is just another mess you'll charm your way out of? You always do. You've lied your whole life to her, to me, to everyone. But this time, people will see you for what you really are. He laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Oh, please. You think anyone cares? You think you can ruin me? You already took everything. I smiled faintly. Not yet. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table screen up. The recording app was open, red light blinking. I think it's time people heard your version of things straight from your mouth, I said. He stiffened. What are you doing? Just talk, I said calmly. Tell me again why you sold the cabin. Tell me how it wasn't really stealing. Tell me how you forged my signature to cover your debts. You always need someone to listen, don't you? Well, I'm listening. His face twisted. You're insane. No, I said softly. I'm done being silent. He stood up abruptly, the chair creaking behind him. Turn that damn thing off. I didn't move. Go ahead, say it again. You didn't think I'd fight back, did you? You thought I'd cry and move on, just like Mom did. That name Mom hit him like a bullet. His expression faltered for the first time. She forgave you, I said. Even when you took everything from her. Even when she was dying, she still believed you had some good left in you. But you didn't. You never did. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You don't know what you're talking about. She was weak. The words came out of him like poison. She was too kind for this world, he continued, voice rising. Always crying, always trying to make everyone happy. She made her choices. You just ruined her, I cut in. You used her, and when she was gone, you used me. He sneered. Oh, don't pretend you were some saint. You liked being the victim. You liked playing the hero. You needed me to be the bad guy so you could feel like you were better than her. I stared at him calm again. No, I just wanted my mother's peace back, and you couldn't let her rest. His voice cracked into a bitter laugh. Rest. She's dead. What does she care? Something inside me snapped, not with rage but with clarity. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly. Because she's still here. In every wall you tried to sell, in every nail you tried to profit from, in everything you couldn't destroy. You never understood you can't sell what someone built out of love. For the first time, he said nothing. The silence between us was thick, ugly, trembling with years of things never said. Then I reached for the phone, stopped the recording, and looked him in the eye. That's all I needed. He looked pale now, his arrogance slipping. You think anyone's going to believe your little recording? You think that's proof? I smiled, standing up. It's not the only thing I have. The court already has copies of the forged deed, the bank transfers, and the witness statement from the notary who said you paid him under the table. His eyes widened, panic flickering in them. I leaned closer. You're finished, Alan. And the best part, you did it to yourself. Then I walked out. As I reached the door, I heard him shout something after me. I couldn't make out the words. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was fear. It didn't matter anymore. When I stepped into the cold night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. The next few months were a blur of hearings, court filings, and statements. Alan's lawyer tried everything, claimed confusion, mental instability, even framed it as a family misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged signature, the falsified documents, the money trail from his gambling debts, it was all there. The day the verdict came, I sat in the courtroom in silence. Alan stood before the judge, gray-faced, trembling, his arrogance finally stripped away. The judge's words were steady. Final, Alan Brooks, you are hereby convicted of fraud, forgery, and unlawful transfer of property. You will serve 5 years in state prison and are ordered to pay restitution to the rightful owner. 5 years. It wasn't enough to erase what he'd done, but it was enough to end the chapter. When the gavel fell, I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for over a decade. Outside the courthouse, the wind was sharp and bright, the sky a deep mountain blue. Hale met me on the steps, hands in his pockets. It's over, he asked. I nodded. It's over. He smiled faintly. Your mom would be proud? I looked up at the sky where the sun was cutting through the clouds and felt a warmth spread through me. Not joy exactly, but peace, the kind that comes after surviving a storm. A month later, I returned to the cabin. It was early morning, the air cool and still. The forest was waking up, the soft rustle of branches, the call of distant birds, the world breathing again. I stood on the porch, running my hand along the railing. The wood was smooth beneath my palm, warm in the morning light. Inside the house smelled like cedar again. I'd torn out the electric fireplace and replaced it with a real one the way my mother built it. I'd even repainted the door the same forest green she loved. I lit a fire, sat down with a cup of coffee, and let the quiet fill the space. For the first time, it felt like home again. Not a battlefield, not a wound, just peace. I looked at my mother's photograph on the mantel, her eyes kind, her smile soft, and whispered, I kept my promise. And in that silence, I swear I could almost hear her voice again, warm and proud. You did, sweetheart. You really did.